Okay, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to April's Open Research Office session. Today's session is on the One Epic Research Readiness. And Michael, whenever you're ready, you can introduce yourself. Oh, I do want to say, if you have any questions or comments throughout, you can either leave it in the chat or just use the raise hand option. Alexis and I will be watching the chat to read it out to him.
Perfect. Well, thanks all for having me today. My name is Michael Flanagan. I'm the Epic Application Manager for the One Epic install, and just coming here today to kind of talk through what we've done in this space, and then what tools and workflows should you be expecting at Go Live and beyond. So kind of talking to that, just want to give a brief overview of what the One Epic project was. One of the biggest aspects of this project has been an integration between Encore and Epic. So I want to talk through what that connection is, and then talk through what study-specific tools we have built out in Epic, and then have some time at the end for Q&A for anything that folks might be wondering as we're leading up to the Go Live here in May, and then eventually for ECMC and UBMD in October. So for a quick background on the One Epic project, so basically Kaleida, ECMC, and UBMD are all installing onto a shared instance of Epic. So basically research users who are going to be working at any of these orgs, or in this case, anyone at the University of Buffalo who is working on a research study at any of these organizations is going to receive access to that One Epic instance. Part of that will be training ahead of time. So some of what's not covered here will be discussed in training as well, where you actually go and see your core research coordinator workflow or research manager workflows. So this is not supposed to be training per se, but it is supposed to kind of talk through some of those specific details that we have for the One Epic project. But yeah, you'll register for training leading up to Go Live, and then like I said, one of the important things we've done as part of this is created an integration between Encore and Epic. So we're going to have studies and patient enrollments flowed between those systems, and I'll kind of talk through what that process looks like. And then post-live, one of the things we want to talk through is what are those study-specific tools that are available in Epic, because those will be something that could be available and useful to your study teams post-live as you begin to use Epic and the functionality within it. So, and then just kind of already mentioned it, but one last reminder, is going to be two Go Lives. So folks might be getting access at different points. If you're a Kaleida employee or you're working on a study within a Kaleida facility, you should be expecting to go live on May 30th. So just over a month from now. And then for ECMC and UBMD study teams, you should be expecting to get access in end of October of this year. Any questions about that before we kind of get into some of the Encore and Epic integration specifics? Okay. So let's talk a bit more about what that looks like. So like I said, there's going to be two main connections between Encore and Epic. The first is going to be your patient enrollment interface. This is going to be sending, if you put a new enrollment status onto a patient in Encore into Epic. And then we're going to have our study record interface as well, which is going to be mostly used by the UB Clinical Research Office to push over those studies from Encore to Epic. So they are available to you in Epic when you are associating patients. It'll show the association as well as drive some other tools that we have in there as well. So first, digging into the patient enrollment interface. Like I said, it's going to send patient enrollment interfaces from Encore to Epic. So the first big call out here is Encore is going to continue to be the source of truth for patient enrollment information. And that should just be reflected within Epic as well for those patients that you're enrolling. One important call out here is that this interface is matching based off the patient MRN number in Encore and Epic. So when you're enrolling patients in Encore, really making sure that that MRN number that's listed is going to be that Epic MRN. We are doing some MRN conversion efforts kind of at this very moment. to make sure that we're like converting any MRNs for patients that we know are going to exist within Epic, to make sure that those match what is in an Encore. So the goal is to have as much as possible already, or as many patients as possible to already have the proper MRN number in Encore. But that is something to keep your eye on, just because, as you know, UB's instance of Encore serves more than just UBMD, ECMC, and Kaleida. It also works with Catholic and Niagara Falls and other places as well. So there are going to be patients who are within Encore, but might not actually have patient record within Epic, which is kind of where you have that discrepancy. So if there is new patients where this might be their first time having an account created in Epic, you'll might need to just double check and ensure that the MRN number is the same between Encore and Epic. And then that last bullet point is just talking through Encore being the source of truth. And then we are also working, or we've configured on the Epic side for those active and inactive enrollment statuses to be disabled. So like if you're a coordinator, you won't even have the option to move them onto like an on study or on treatment status, or like any of those completed or on follow-up statuses either. We do still have some statuses that are available to be selected in Epic, which are statuses that happen pre-consent. So those are going to be interested, identified, and like waiting for consent. The reason we have those options available is if you are screening patients within the MRN and you want to remember to come back to this person for trial outreach, we still want to say that like this is a patient who's been identified as a potential study candidate. But in terms of actually indicating that they're participating in the study record, you should still be using Encore as a source of truth for that information. Any questions around the patient enrollment interface and how that works? Okay. And then I just want to talk through a bit of what that patient enrollment in Epic is actually driving. So first of all, it's going to bring awareness that a patient is an active research participant to other clinicians using Epic, Kaleida ECMC, and UBMD. So it's going to have a banner in their storyboard, which I can show here in a second, that is saying that they're a research participant. And then if you click into that, it'll provide them additional information around like what the study is, who's the PI, and then a description of the study that we're all having flow over from Encore. And then it'll also help facilitate research charge review. So those actively enrolled patients on interventional trials are going to have their charges held for review by the study team and UBCRO. And basically, the call out here is it's important to be maintaining enrollment status as opposed to in real time as possible when the patient is enrolled in the trial or when they're moved into a completed or on follow-up status. So I'm sure that's not any different than what that is done today. But just because it drives some additional features within Epic, it just has like maybe a bit more importance as well, just because it'll have impacts to like work that needs to be done on the back end or just general awareness around this patient's participation in a trial. Any questions here? Okay. Then the second interface that is being set up right now and will be available for our Wave 1 go live is our study record interface. So it's going to send those study protocols within Encore over to Epic, and then those will become Epic study records. So basically what that means is Encore is still going to be the source of truth for the majority of fields within Epic. Little asterisk there is there are some fields that should only be set in Epic, and Epic will be the source of truth for those. And I'll share in a second what those fields are. But basically, big call out here is Encore is a source of truth. And then that if you want changes or updates to fields in Epic that are where Encore is a source of truth, you're still going to want to kind of follow the same process you are today of updating the Encore study record and having that pushed into Epic. And we've locked down those fields in Epic that are supposed to be maintained within Encore. So you won't even have the ability to edit those in Epic, similar to how we have the enrollment statuses set up. So really just trying to, keep Encore the source of truth and reduce as much dual documentation where possible, and kind of setting up some system settings. So we're blocking that entirely. So you're not going to get confused where something should be done one place or the other. Any questions or comments or anything else around study record interface?
Michael, it's Kim. Just for the coordinators out there, we are in the process of also updating the CSR form that will indicate if services are going on in any of the places that have the One Epic connection, and so that we know which studies early on, excuse me, will be going into the Epic environment. And if it looks like we have made a decision one way or the other, then we're open to, the whys and the wherefores if you think it either should go into Epic or the reason that it shouldn't.
Definitely. Thank you, Kim.
There is a question in the chat that says, when will training start and what happens to studies already in progress?
Yep, it's a good question. So training has begun for wave one. So if you are a study team that is expecting to go live in May, you should have received emails. I know Deanna Coleman on the Kaleida side, along with Danny Zhang, have done a lot of outreach to the users that at least we've identified as needing access to get signed up and registered for training. If you're part of wave one, you should kind of already be in the process of attending training and getting access. If you're not, please let us know. And then for wave two, training is going to begin kind of around starting 3 months before. So like sometime this summer, I can get exact dates and send that out with the notes. But that will be kind of a rough timeline for training later on.
Okay, Michael, the one that one of the ones that is asking is actually a coordinator and provider at Kaleida and has not received that training information as yet. So,
okay, I can look into you in particular, Mary, and let you know more information.
thank you.
Thank you. I was signed up for Kaleida and they canceled me. We have a new study start this month. So this
Okay.
is going to affect me.
Yes, I'm sorry to hear that you were canceled. And like I said, I'll look into that following this meeting. Let me just make a quick note so I don't forget.
And hey, Ping, yes and no. So they may be core in there. They won't have a lot of things that are tied to them as far as those observationals go. So we will put some of them over just for the ability for them to be seen in my chart, and so to help boost recruitment efforts. But as far as anything goes, there's two portions to what we push over from Encore. One is the study, and then the other is the billing component. Because the observations won't have those billing components, that part will not be pushed over. So it's a twofold push for us. And sorry to jump in there, Michael.
No, it's a good point. I wasn't talking quite about the billing protocols yet, because I know they might not all be pushed over for wave one. We're really targeting more of that to be completely in place for wave two. But yeah, to Kim's point, we're only going to be pushing study records for those observational ones and not like the study calendars that you have within Encore for the observational. Any other questions or comments kind of around the study record interface, and I'll kind of get into more specifics here. Okay, so kind of talking through what are those particular fields where Encore is going to be the source of truth. So still the study name, what the code is, description for the study, the NCT number, study type. So whether that's an observational or interventional study, study status, whether this is like an actively recruiting study, whether it's active but not open to accrual, what study division or department. So is this being ran by cardiology? Is this being ran by neurology? The IRB approval number, and then the list of users who will be able to access and work on this study. So the PI, co-Is, research coordinators, and then what study arms are going to be flowing over as well. And then to Kim's point, for those interventional trials, we're also planning to have their study calendars still be the source of truth within Encore and then pushed over to Epic. So you can see it's a lot of that really core information. And the call out here is if you do want any updates to those to be reflected in Epic, you should still be going to Encore to make those updates. We wouldn't expect anything to be done directly within Epic in terms of changing these fields. And then in terms of fields where Epic is a source of truth, Epic is going to be the source of truth for MyChart, which is the patient portal that is associated with Epic. So if you want to recruit patients via MyChart, we have places to put in information on like patient-facing name and description, where you can send out those recruitment messages to patients. We also have MyChart messaging, so patients who are enrolled in the study or who have expressed interest can send messages to the study teams, and this can be configured to be sent to like just the coordinators or both the coordinators and the PIs. By default, we have it set up to be routed to the coordinators, so that can be configured within Epic. And then what we'll talk about here in just a second is some study-specific tools that we have available in Epic. So contraindicated medication groupers, research recruitment alerts, smart forms, order sets and smart sets, patient-reported outcome questionnaires. If any of those tools as part of your studies, as you kind of begin to use Epic and hopefully some of the more options that we kind of have available for direct like study processes to be done within Epic with these tools, if those are needed within Epic, you will be plugging those into the study records here as well. And they'll obviously need to be built within Epic to facilitate that.
And can I, I'm going to jump in.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Of course. You know I do. When we send things, are we going to be sending things over into Epic? It will come when we hit a status or when the study hits the status of IRB approval. So we get reports every morning of those things that have those studies that have reached IRB approval. We update Encore accordingly. So for those of you who have central IRBs, it's most important at this point that you keep that study updated in the local IRB, because that's where we're going to get that information that it is open to, that it has reached IRB approval, which means that we are going to start working on it to get it into Epic, doing that push, getting everything ready that way. So if you have forgotten or have not put your study in and you're trying to enroll somebody, it will not come across that way because you haven't updated it and we haven't got it being able to be built as yet and pushed over into Encore or into Epic. So very, very important if you've got those central IRBs, as soon as you get that IRB approval, please upload it into the local so that we can get things moving on our end. And the other is because the go live is coming very shortly for many of the studies. If you would all just kind of take a quick peek at the study status that you have for ongoing studies, make sure that is up to date. Make sure that your subject enrollment is up to date, because when we go and we do the conversion, all of that is going to flow into Epic. So we need the most up-to-date information that we have. So if you all just take a look at your current studies and make sure that everything is up to date, your subject visits and your study statuses, that would be very much appreciated. Take it away, Michael.
No, really good call outs from Kim, and I'll definitely emphasize what her last point there as well is if you have definitely take the time now to make sure that your studies are in the right status and have the correct information in them. It'll make everyone's life easier at go live, where the study record contains information that you're expecting it to. So if you haven't updated those in a while, definitely within the next couple of weeks, hop in and make sure that they all look correct. And then there was one question. Oh, go ahead.
Michael, I just wanted to add to Kim and your point, since we are going to the two-tier billing review, that updating your studies in Encore is going to be extremely important because the coordinators are going to be responsible for viewing the accuracy of the information that has been entered in Epic, so those claims can be released on the Kaleida side. So if your study's not updated, you're going to be getting claims for those patients that are in the study for potentially non-research related encounters.
Definitely. Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit about research billing review towards the end as well, and what that kind of means for study teams. Any other questions? Oh, and there was a question in the chat around whether we'll still be using patient IQ for patient-reported outcome measures. So that's what we'll be talking about here in just a second, around like what tools are available in Epic. The idea is not that you need to change your current state from what you're doing today to Epic. Really, what we kind of want to make everyone aware of as part of these research open hours is that there will be the option to have tools built out within Epic. So if that's option, I'll kind of talk through like what those look like here in just a second. But that could be another tool kind of within your study team's tool belt that you can use as a way to like collect information or run your trials. Yes, and then there was a question in the chat from Taylor Reed and just around whether they need to change the status of participants in Encores who have completed the study prior to the transition. And Maria, yes, please, is the perfect answer. Definitely want to make sure that participant information and enrollment status is as up to date as possible before go live. Okay. They want to talk through one of our core workflows here real quick before we get into those study-specific tools, but encounter and order linking within Epic is something that'll be new for folks. This is going to be part of coordinator training, so not going to go super deep into the weeds today, but want to talk through at a high level what it is and what's the importance of it. So for those of you who haven't seen it yet or haven't gone to training because you might be part of Wave 2, basically one of the core responsibilities for research coordinators in Epic is linking upcoming encounters. Encounters is kind of just the word for any admissions, appointments, or procedures, as well as individual orders from research studies as well. So if you're placing like a comprehensive metabolic panel, for instance, and that is going to be study related, build a sponsor, or just study related in general, you'll want to make sure to do that encounter linking and order linking. I can kind of show a bit of what that looks like here. And then basically what this drives downstream is one, patient aware care of what is research related. So pretty quickly you can look at like the encounters for a patient and see which of those were related to the study. It also to like kind of what Pam was speaking to earlier for research billing review, it helps facilitating those bucketing of charges. So when you link the encounter and you link the order, that is going to drive downstream to our research billing review process, where you'll actually get to see that this like visit was research related, and then the charges, if it's like a split visit where you have some being done in standard of care and some is research, the ones that were research related are in fact like indicated that way as well. This will also help with notification of appointment changes. So for those research linked appointments, if that time gets rescheduled, or if the patient misses the appointment or cancels, that'll send like a notification to the study team letting them know. So that'll kind of help you manage your participants. And then also it'll help for those orders. It'll give notifications when the research lab results are ready for review. to the study team. So if you're linking those orders and those results come back and it's not being done as like a research send out to a central lab, but rather being done like in-house at Kaleida, ECMC, or UBMD, you'll get notifications of those orders. Any general questions around encounter and order linking? If not, I will hop in and show what order linking looks like in Epic. Like I said, not supposed to be training, but just general awareness, so folks can kind of see what this process looks like. Okay, let's switch over to Epic real quick. Sorry, it's not showing me the environment that I'm looking for here. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I'll log in as our research coordinator here. So that's just our kind of generic login for RSHRC. What this will take us to is like our default dashboard for our research coordinator. So this is showing like what needs to be reviewed, like actively enrolled patients in your studies, if you have patients that are marked as interested or potential participants needing outreach, or if you've sent out recruitment requests via my chart and you can kind of track what are awaiting responses. We also have some tracking for like adverse events or patients who need timelines based on whether we send those calendars over from Encore or not. There's a bunch of really useful information. I won't get into everything here because that's more of what you'll see in your training. What I do want to show is order linking. So if I'm just going to pull up an encounter. Normally you would do this within like an office visit for the patient. But this is just for purposes of kind of showing the workflow in terms of actually associating the order to the encounter. So here at the bottom, you as a coordinator will have the ability to queue up orders. So this is not placing them, they're not really active, but it will allow you to send these orders to the PI, saying that, or whoever is helping actually sign those orders. And you can say like, as part of their treatment for this day, they need a CDC, for instance, that needs to be accounted for based on their participation in the study. So we can do a research association. This patient is on like this Discover One trial. So basically what I did there is we have this research association button. So you click that and then link it to the trial and hit accept. This little research association button will pop up. If you hover over it, it'll tell you what trial this has been associated to. And like I said, downstream, what this will drive is it'll be indicator to the research billers, which is UPAM, the UBCRO, when they're reviewing charges, that this was a research-related charge that should be, in alignment with the coverage analysis, either be, study-related billed as sponsor or study-related billed as standard of care. Either way, if it falls into either of those buckets, we want it to be associated with the study. So there's that indication that this was something that happened for research in particular. And the same kind of thought process happens to encounter linking as well. But that's just going to be something that on a day-to-day basis, when orders are being placed for research participants or appointments are happening for research participants, making sure that we have that linkage indicating that it was related to the study. And then one other thing I wanted to highlight here as well is this is that research participant banner that I was talking about earlier. So if a patient is in a trial and enrolled, so you enrolled in Encore, that flows over to Epic. Part of what that will drive is awareness that they are a research participant over here on the left. So it's really clear to other clinicians who might be working with this patient that they are a research participant. Any general questions kind of around that brief workflow? Like I said, not supposed to be super comprehensive, and training will be more geared towards talking through more of the specifics, but this is a very important workflow within Epic and a change from normally what is being done current state. So wanted to at least show that briefly here, leading up to go live. And then there's a question in the chat, do we enter the patient first in Encore? The answer to that is yes. You still will want to enter the patient enrollment into Encore, and that should flow over to Epic. But then it will appear here. And if you click on this little banner, this is where it'll give more details around the study. So it'll say Discover One. This is obviously just like example trial, but it'll have a description of what the trial is, who's the principal investigator. This is also where you can link the encounter to the research study. So that's that encounter linking aspect of it. So you can say that this is, and we have like a protocol for this one. You're going to say that this is related to Discover One, and then this visit day of the trial.
And this is also where it becomes very important when you are registering a patient in Encore to make sure you do the lookup to make sure that that they have, or see if they have an ID in Epic. So that's the only way that we are going to be able to link them up and put them over onto the study, is if that MRN number or the demos match up. So the source of truth, as Michael said, is Encore for the patient enrollment and all of the protocol information. The source of demos is, the source of truth is Epic. So that flow goes, I want to say back and forth, but it's very, very important that you don't just hit generate new patient. When you're registering a subject, you needs to check and make sure that they don't exist already.
I have a quick question. Can everybody hear me? This is Cindy from ECMC.
Hey, Cindy.
Hi. I don't know if this is a silly question or not, but I'm just trying to wrap my brain over all of this. So for like the dashboard and everything that you were showing us before for the research coordinators, is that going to be under their UB login, or specifically for ECMC, would they have to log in with an ECMC login to, one, view that, and to place orders and do all of that and validate the billing and all that? Would they have to have a separate login for ECMC, or could they do that all through UB and see all of that?
Yeah, they should all be able to do it for their UB login. So it'll be like one user record for each person. They won't have like one for ECMC and one for UB. It'll just be a single one. And then the studies, and then like what kind of drives what we're seeing here in terms of like who's the actively enrolled patients or what needs to be reviewed by the study team. This is all going to be driven by what study records they're listed on. So that'll show them the subset of studies that are pertinent to them.
Okay, so anything pertinent to what study they're doing and what patients they're using is what they'd be able to see.
Exactly. And that's like another important call out for folks who are double checking your study records to make sure that, you know, the coordinators that are working on those studies are listed out there, and you're not missing anyone.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. Any other thoughts or questions people had kind of at this point? Okay, let me hop back to my slides real quick then, and we'll talk through, oh, I see a chat popped up. And the question is, will there be Encore training for workflows that may have not existed prior to the integration? And then I see Maria is answering that in the chat. Okay. Oh, pop through there quick. But the next thing I wanted to talk through was, can everyone see my screen? Okay, it looks like it's sharing now. Is study-specific tools. So these are talking through what tools we have available in Epic Kind of the earlier questions, this is not going to be a change in what tools you need to be using for your current state studies, really just an option for you, future state, to have additional tools that are kind of like natively built within the EMR, rather than maybe needing to use like another like outside third party. So kind of just wanted to share them as awareness. And we are working on CSR updates as well, that if you are interested in using these tools, that you can indicate that not only that. So like to Kim's point, the first step is like, is this a study that should be included in Epic? And then if it is, you can also indicate whether like as part of your study design, if you'd want one of these study specific tools built out for Epic. And then we have our Epic research analysts, Atul Pharma, and then David Pinto, who would kind of help work with you to build out these tools. So kind of brief background, and we'll hop into what these specific tools are. So the first is contraindicated medications. So these are warnings that pop up for clinicians if they're trying to order a medication that might potentially jeopardize the patient's participation in the study or could have an adverse reaction to the study. So if this is like something that would be valuable to study teams, like we can build out these medication groupers, and then based on like what level of like effect, whether this is going to be like potential study disqualification or like patient harm, we have like different levels of warnings that will pop up. And then this will prompt providers to put in an override reason if they want to proceed with ordering that medication despite the warning. So that's kind of the first one. Any questions around contraindicated medications? Okay. The other one is research recruitment or practice advisories. So these are kind of similar to medication warnings, but like really it uses the same framework within Epic of alerts that display to providers. But these are basically a way that if patients meet certain criteria, it can either display within that visit this patient meets the criteria for, like in this example on the right, the insomnia trial. We can also, and this can be like very specific to like only display in certain departments or only display for patients that meet certain conditions. And then we can also, depending on what makes sense from a workflow perspective, maybe it's like if a patient admits to the emergency department with some sort of chief complaint, and that would lead a study team to want to recruit that patient, we could also configure it so it sends an in-basket message to the study team members that this patient has arrived. And this is a good way to kind of just have more kind of like automated awareness for where there might be patients that could be recruited for a trial. So that's kind of the general. And then the question is, how will orders be handled on day of surgery? Do you have a particular question? So like they all kind of follow a similar process of entering those orders kind of in the same like add order toolbar at the bottom. And that's what'll queue them up in Epic.
We have a study start next month. Patients are going to get infusions in the holding area after their knee surgery. So the physician has to put those orders in so that the nurse administers the infusion. So that would go through Epic.
Yeah, you would fill them.
And then it would be tagged as a research study activity, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So that general workflow is like physician would enter the orders for the infusion, which would allow like the nurse to like actually administer that infusion. And then at the time of ordering, we'd want to make sure that we're doing that research linking, which will help like drive like general awareness around that this is a research related infusion, as well as those billing impacts downstream as well.
Yeah, because we're going to have a set of orders for these patients that will include blood work, infusion, paperwork that needs to be completed, so that can all go through Epic. I think I'm going to push the study start till June instead of next month.
Okay, and happy to talk more offline or like an additional meeting if you have any questions around that as well. Any questions around like our practice advisory alerts within Epic. They're pretty versatile tools. So if you have like an idea of like how you would want one to work, that's definitely something to at least like indicate to the Epic team during CSR that this could be of benefit to your team. And then they can like talk through particular details around how that might be able to be built out. Yeah. And then we have research recruitment via MyChart. This is one of the more popular tools that we see groups using. So basically, the idea here is if you have like a patient-facing name and description, as you're going through maybe like pre-screening within a patient's chart, and you're figuring out who might be potentially eligible patients for a trial, you can send them a recruitment request, basically, which will send them a message within their MyChart account, which will give them details around the study. So what that description you've configured is, so that will display to them, and then they can indicate whether they would like to participate in that trial, which will be a good indicator to the study team to kind of reach out with additional information and then begin the informed consent process if they are a fit for the trial. And kind of just the call out here is like to use that recruitment request is just having that patient-facing information created and approved by the IRB to make sure that you're using language that is, understandable and appropriate for the person. Any questions around MyChart recruitment?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I've been doing studies for many years. Typically, recruitment is always better if the physician talks to the patient first. I don't know if pushing information over online, especially with an elderly population, which we deal with for joint replacement, a lot of them don't even have email addresses. So will the information be automatically pushed or can we block it? Because I would rather have it come from the physician and not from an online notice.
Definitely. So this is completely configurable on a per study basis. If it doesn't make sense for your trial, you don't need to use this functionality, but we do see success in, recruiting some patients of, certain populations using this. So it doesn't need to be used for your particular use case.
All right, that's good to know. Because I think that's a bad idea, especially since it's a new drug.
Yeah, and there's definitely instances where it makes more sense to, talk to the patient in person when they're in the clinic rather than seeing if they're interested via MyChart.
Okay.
And this is kind of just showing what this looks like. So like on the left, they'll get like an email saying, hey, you've been identified as a potential study for candidate for a research study. They'll be able to view the study and it'll give them information around who's the principal investigator, who are study team members, description of what the trial is and what they're looking for. And then kind of towards the bottom, they can indicate whether they're interested or not. And if there's like some more additional background information that you need from them to know whether or not they would be like a actual candidate for participation, you can like link a questionnaire to that. So if they say they're interested, then they can fill out like a quick questionnaire saying that like, in this case, for an asthma study, how often they use a rescue inhaler, if they're currently participating in any trials, and then if they want to be reached out in the future, if they have a preferred method of communication. So just kind of showing an example of what this may look like for you. E-consents. So this is another option. If you're doing e-consenting today or would like to in the future, is we can build out e-consent forms within Epic where you can directly have those consents either signed in hyperspace, like when you're meeting with the patient in clinic, using welcome tablets, so like an iPad or some other tablet that you might have within your clinic, e-signature pads, so if you like a Topaz or any other type of pad that's connected to a computer, you can sign that way. Or if you want to, you can send them over MyChart as well, where they can sign like directly on their phone and have time to read through everything. And then this also kind of enables patients to view that consent in the office or at home if you're like sharing it via MyChart as well. So it gives them another copy of that consent that they agreed to that's like easy to access for them. Any questions here on e-consents? Okay. I want to leave some time for Q&A, so I might move through the rest of these tools pretty quickly and then touch on a couple things for research billing review. But stop me if there are any questions, and if not, we can have some time at the end for Q&A. So the next tool is going to be Smart Forms for research data capture. So this is like pretty much allowing for discrete data to be entered into Epic and then reported off of. So these are forms that can be built out if you're, asking every time a patient comes in, like kind of using the same asthma example, that like when was their most recent asthma episode? What was it precipitated by? And then like what therapies did they use to like treat that episode? So this could be built out for a per study basis, or if there's like general data capture you kind of do across studies, something that can be configured that way as well. We also have research ordering tools, so smart sets and order sets, basically helping with queuing up specific orders that are related to research. Also helps like with automatically linking those orders to the study, so it's easier to like have accurate identification of research related orders. So generally pretty useful tools, not only for one, making sure that the right orders get placed for the study, but also that they have that research association. And then we have our patient reported outcome questionnaires. So this is where you can send, there's kind of two options here. You can either meet with the patient in person and fill it out alongside them in the clinic, or if you would like to like have them fill out a weekly survey, for instance, as part of the trial, you can have that sent over to the MyChart account, and they can complete that either like outside of a visit or in hyperspace during the visit, like I said. And then lastly, like those questionnaire responses can be collected and then like exported from Epic, so you can do any analysis based on those answers. And then want to touch through research billing review real quick. So basically, research billing review is going to be a two-tiered billing review process, where the first tier is study team members. The purpose for this is if you are on a trial and meeting with patients, we want to make sure that if you, for whatever reason, may have forgot to link an encounter or link an order, that we're still saying for those charges that should be billed to the study sponsor or should be research related, are still getting that indication that those are research related charges. And we don't want to make sure that we're going to be incorrectly billing a patient or incorrectly billing insurance for something that should be sent to the opposite party. So really just the goal of the study team review is to make sure that you didn't miss anything at the time of the encounter or at the time of ordering. And that second tier will be the UBCRO, where they can look through using the coverage analysis and making sure that, based on what the sponsor said that they would cover for the trial, that it's appropriately bucketed as so. So that's going to be the general process, and then planning to hop over real quick into Epic to show what this activity looks like, so people can get a sense of what this might look like on a day-to-day basis. And I do see Mary got a question. If a subject misses a question, is there a way to go back and get the form completed? So yes, and we can actually make like questions required for those questionnaires. So if you want and you don't want them to go complete anything without filling out the questions, we can make it so they can't continue until they've completed all the questionnaires that you're expecting. Okay, and let me just hop over into Epic one last time, and then we should hopefully have 5 minutes, and I should be able to stay on for a little bit afterwards as well to talk through any questions that folks may have. Okay. Now I'm going to show what this would look like as a study team member. So one of the things you'll see on this view right in the middle is this study team billing review. So it'll show you how many patients are awaiting study review, and then like what balance that adds up to. An important call out here is we're, holding potentially more than just the research charges in this review. So it's important to do this review on a timely cadence. So we're making sure that we're getting charges out the door. But for instance, it'll show you, sorry, let me go back to the report real quick. It'll show you the name of the patient, the study code and name, so you know what trial this is related to, their enrollment status, so whether they're on study or not, when they started, and then the balance that is being held up by that. And then we can pop into the actual research billing review activity. So it'll give you some information and background around that trial, so like study code, what status it is, and the study type, like college, division, or department. And then from here, it'll have a breakdown of the billing encounter. So it'll show you that during the encounter, it looks like we associated this CBC and sodium chloride as billed a study. And then in terms of the patient, study related bill to patient, we said that there's a metabolic panel and this medication that was study related, but it's still going to be billed as standard of care. And then we had a few other standard of care charges that happened during that appointment that are non-study related charges. Now, the purpose of this activity is that if any of this information is incorrect, we want to indicate that and move the bucketing. So for instance, let's say, okay, these are saying that they're study related bill to patient / insurance, but in reality, we're expecting all of these charges to be study related bill to sponsor. So we can select both of those charges. And then up here, we can hit research correct. And then this will change this from, and then here you have the option to change this from study related bill to insurance / patient to study related bill to the study or sponsor. So when we accept that, it'll change the bucketing of those charges. So now they're all study related bill to study. The same can be done, like the opposite is true too. Like if something is study related bill to study, but shouldn't be, you can do the same thing here, research correct those, and then say that these are not study related charges. And when you accept that, it'll move them down into the non-study related bucket. So really across the board here, the goal is to make sure that you're making sure that the charges that are study related are indicated as such. And then once that's complete, you're marking that the review has been completed from the study team's perspective. So as long as you're aware of what visits should be happening for your trial, and what charges or orders or like the what is happening as part of that visit for the trial, you can pretty quickly go through, indicate what was related to research, and then mark your billing as reviewed. This also allows you to add a note upstream for Pam and her team, where you can say that you reviewed the technical charges, but in this case, we actually moved some charges as study related bill to insurance / patient to non-study related charges, and you could indicate that here as well. So you have some documentation of what was done. So for the sake of time, I won't write out a note right now, but I can accept that. That's going to mark down as study user review completed, and that will be passed along to the CRO for review as well. And then I see a question in the chat. Will Epic orders replace the paper forms patient used for study lab work? So it kind of depends. For the most part, we're expecting, like if this is a lab that's available and orderable in Epic, that you're placing that order within Epic, so then we can queue up charges and make sure that we have like documentation within system. It's also easier if you're placing orders within Epic to get the results back and into the patient's chart. For study send outs, however, we're still expecting those to be, if you're sending those to a central lab, we're still expecting those to be done. Okay. I know we only have a couple minutes remaining here, but are there any questions or additional information that I can help provide everyone as we lead up to go live here? Okay, and then for the sake of the recording, I just want to share this last slide as well. If you do have questions, please reach out to Atul and David for like any study-specific tool questions, or if you just have any Epic-related questions or concerns in general, reach out to myself and Max. I have all of our emails listed here. We definitely want to make sure that you feel supported and ready for go live. So please let us know what you may be wondering. And then, yes, I will share the slides following this meeting as well.
And if you have any encore questions that are related to this as well, you can either reach out to me or Maria, and we can help you along that way. I just want to say thank you again, Michael, for joining us today and giving us all the info.
Of course, yeah, happy to help. Please reach out with questions. Happy to answer them. So thank you all.
Thanks, Michael.
Mhm.